So cool. I wanted to go there so bad.
It wrapped it on the opposite side, and like that's not a good side for me to have this on. So sorry.
And so there's no having to be anything other
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Art Talk featuring our exhibiting artist, Cheyenne Wyntar. My name is Jim Schurter, and on behalf of the Art and Design Department here at Mott Community College, I want to welcome you all today. So thank you for taking some time out. This is part of our centennial exhibitions that have kicked off, and with this semester, our winter term of 2023, we are featuring former students and their accomplishments and their celebrations, and Cheyenne is no exception to that. Being a 2021 graduate of our graphic design program, she betrayed me and my love for design and had to be an amazing artist. So it is very good to have you here today, Cheyenne. So thank you for coming here.
Thank you. I'm really, really excited to be here.
So today's format is going to be a little bit different than what we do sometimes. Usually the artist is giving kind of a formal talk about their work and process. We've opted for a much more casual kind of talk show kind of format. So we're just going to be having some conversations. We'll have opportunities for you. If you have a question, you can let us know. At the end of the talk, we'll definitely have time for Q&A as well. So thank you. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your background?
Okay, so I grew up in Flint, Michigan, and I'm really proud to be from here. I grew up in a lower class single parent household, and so a lot of my childhood was a struggle medically because we couldn't access medical care, and then financially because we didn't have any money. And that really impacted my education and was kind of the reason that I ended up coming to Mott. I thought for sure that I wanted to do photography when I was in high school, and Mott Middle had the opportunity for you to be in the photography program. So I transferred and wanted to jumpstart my career. I ended up taking one prerequisite for art and changed my major immediately. About halfway through that semester, I said, I'm done with photography actually, and this is what I want to do forever. And then it's just kind of built and built and built, and now this is where I've ended up. I'm disabled, I'm queer, and I have a lot of things to say about it and the ways that my history and my background kind of created who I am today.
Okay. To kind of back up a little bit about you being in Mott Middle,
Mm-hmm.
and then coming here, did you have other kind of, was it because of being here on the Mott campus for Mott Middle College that kind of naturally led you here? Was it financial? Did you have dreams of going to a four-year institution or anything like that?
I did. It was all of those things. So I was already on campus a lot because I had a family member who worked here. So I was really comfortable on campus from a young age. And then there were the opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise financially. Being able to take college classes and have them covered and have my materials covered by the school wouldn't have happened anywhere else that I was aware of at the time. So it made the most logical sense. Also, Mott Middle College was the most accommodating for me as a disabled student. I am autistic and have ADHD, though I didn't know it at the time. And I'm also physically disabled. And being able to plan my schedule around a college schedule and have big gaps in my day where I could sleep on campus if I needed to was the reason that I was able to graduate. And I was able to graduate with 45 college credits that I paid nothing for. So that was a really, really, really big deal to me. And then I did have plans to immediately transfer to a four-year school. I wanted to go to Columbia, Chicago. But that didn't end up happening, and I ended up staying at Mott to finish my degree, which I'm really thankful for because it was way more accommodating than I expected it would have been at a four-year university.
Nice. Thanks for the plug. So when you were in Mott Middle College and you took that first photography class, what was it that even made you look at any of the visual arts? What was it making you kind of choose that as a pathway?
I grew up drawing and knitting and crocheting, and I grew up in an artistic family where a lot of people had bedtime stories. There were years where I had art history lessons none of the lessons stuck, but the art did. And there were things that I remember looking at 6, 7, 8 years old and going, oh my God, I hope someday I can do that. So I wanted to go into photography as a teenager because I have aphantasia and I can't picture things in my head. And so I was convinced, one, I would be able to memorize things or remember things if I was photographing them. And two, I didn't think I could be a good artist. And I was convinced that I would never make it as a visual artist because I didn't have any confidence until I took that class. At that point, I was about halfway through the photography program. And I realized I can do this, actually, and I have a lot to say. And so that's what I did. I never stopped.
So you've talked about your disabilities. You've mentioned about being queer and having that. So can you talk to us, because this title of this show very much relates to who you are,
Yes.
right? Art and other chronic pains. So why did you choose that as your title?
It's a little complicated. I have been in chronic pain my entire life. I was born medically complicated, and I became a disabled adult. I remember the really severe chronic pain started when I started getting dislocations in middle school. So I had my first major dislocation in 6th grade in 2006. And that was a full knee dislocation. And we didn't know it at the time, but I was also having rib dislocations, which is as painful as it sounds. So I would, be at home all the time because I was sick and because I was in pain. And I had chronic migraines and I would lose vision. So being at school just didn't make sense. But there's not a lot of choice when you're a kid. You're told you just have to figure it out. You have to figure out how to be like everyone else, or you're never going to get anywhere. And the only way that I could sit in class with the physical stuff as well as the learning disability stuff and not feel like my brain was eating itself was to be making art. And so for a very long time, art was my relief from pain or my distraction from pain. And I had a lot of really big feelings about current events as a queer person, as a poor person. I was really, really aware from a really young age. And there wasn't any way to express that people would listen to besides making art. And so that meant a lot to me to be heard in that way. And then as I got older, art started causing pain. So my hands are hypermobile. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which that's causing the dislocations, but also hypermobility. And that causes arthritis as well as tendon issues. And I've torn ligaments in my shoulders. So sitting at an easel is excruciating sometimes, but it's my relief. And it's also my identity. And so they're so intertwined that it's a complicated way to live. But making art has never been a choice for me. It's always been something that I needed to do. And I've never had the option of not being in pain. So it's just life, it's survival.
When you were dealing with this in your youth, just like with the ADHD and that, were the other issues with the dislocations and that, was that like, how long did it take to actually get a diagnosis so you knew what was happening?
So I was diagnosed with ADHD and autism last year at the age of 27. It wasn't until a partner started saying, I really think you're autistic, for 3 years before I finally said, let me look into that. I think you might be right. And I wasn't diagnosed with EDS or the comorbidities, mast cell activation syndrome and POTS until I was 23 years old. On average, it takes women and femme-presenting people about 10 years to get a diagnosis for EDS. It is considered a rare disorder. It is actually rarely diagnosed.
And that's the rarity,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because we know other people.
We know other people.
Have
Once
some of
you
these
are
symptoms.
diagnosed with it, they just come out of the woodworks. Everyone that you know is hypermobile and trying to get a diagnosis, actually. Yeah.
So, because you have a lot to say, and I think maybe with this exhibition, can you maybe give us some insights on, are you obviously have narratives, and I know that from just talking to you when we were bringing the work in, but narratives or specific themes that you specifically want to explore in your work?
Yeah. So this collection of work specifically is focused on disability, identity, isolation, and on the flip side, community.
Because some of this you did during COVID.
Because a lot of it I did during COVID. And so it kind of started with the painting that I did that's in the back of the staircase. Like I said, I grew up basically on Mott campus, and I was in the photography program. And for those of you who don't know, the Mott Middle program is in the Mott Memorial Building, and those are on opposite sides of campus. And they're separated by that staircase, which half of the year, if not more, you cannot actually go up. So you have to walk around a road to get to the RTC building. And when you have a camera and your art stuff and a big backpack and your knees want to dislocate and your blood isn't getting to your brain, that's really hard. And while I was painting that, I was thinking of my fond memories and also my difficult memories of not being able to make it to class some days. You know, being isolated from my peers, not feeling like I was keeping up with everybody as a result of that staircase. And then when I worked on Get These Birds' Nests Out of Me, that's when things kind of, settled in my brain on, this is a collection of work that I want to make. This piece was about me shaving my head, which ties into identity. I'm non-binary and queer, and but also disability. Having hair is so overstimulating, and it can be painful, and you're just and also with grief and change, which was the original assignment, paint change. This was the start of the pandemic. This was, I think, one of the first pieces that I painted from home. And it was about losing so many things and the changes that we have to make to be able to survive. And then some of the other pieces have been documenting the relief that comes with disability pride, the pain that comes when you don't have it or when you don't have support. Or this change in holding each other up, you held me down, the community that you can have and the ways that they can harm you when they do things like decide the COVID pandemic is over and you're stuck back in isolation in a way you never were before because now you've lost all of your friends. And as a disabled person and a queer person, that really hit hard because that's our history. For years, disabled people weren't even allowed in public because of ugly laws until the mid-70s. From like the late 1800s to the late 1900s, disabled people weren't allowed to be in community. It was legally not allowed. The isolation was extreme, and people hid their disabled family members. And so for much of the COVID pandemic, I thought of the generations before me. And then I thought of all of the queer people who lived before me who had to live in secret and had to have a big part of their life separated and live in that deep isolation. And the many of us who went to jail either for being queer or being disabled and are now living in solitary confinement. So it's kind of convoluted and it's kind of all layered. But there was so much thinking happening in those 3 years post-COVID. I felt really connected to previous generations.
Well, and how are you doing now? You've talked about still feeling isolated now that we're coming out of it, right? So how are you dealing with that? And how is that kind of tying into some of what you're doing now, maybe?
It feels, that's what this piece is about a lot. It feels like being held down and being gaslit by an entire nation, an entire world, because if your ribs dislocate, if you have a cough, and there's this problem going around that causes severe coughs that already puts the average person in the hospital on a ventilator, that's not a risk that I'm willing to take. And even just getting people to mask around me feels impossible. So there's 3 or 4 people that I see on a regular basis, and they're also disabled. So we take care of each other. Without disabled community, I would have no community that I could stand for.
Do you think in a way that maybe during the pandemic it strengthened some of those bonds for you with some of
Yes.
other disabled people?
Absolutely. I think a lot about the ways that relationships were affected by COVID. I'm non-monogamous, so I date multiple people, and my friendships are as important to me as my romantic relationships, and I try to keep them fairly equal in the attention that I give them. And I see the ways that other people who felt that way previously have moved to like strict monogamy to keep their lives, to keep safe, and the ways that we've had to shrink our lives so much smaller, and as a result, the few connections that we do have feel so much stronger because we have to rely on each other and can't rely on the people that we normally would, and so you just get closer and more codependent.
Do you think that was a good thing or a bad thing?
I think for me, it has been a very sad and scary thing. But it's also been really beautiful. You know, there are people in my life who I talk to every day who I've rarely been in public with. They've never been to my favorite restaurant. We've never been to a concert together. There are things that we might never do together because of our risk levels. And that's really hard. And there are people who needed more support from more people to have their needs met, and they cannot have them met. I'm thinking of people like my friend recently recovered from surgery, and they're disabled and I'm disabled, but I was there for 11 days being their primary caretaker when I need a caretaker some days because that was the safest option. We had people who did come in and help here and there, but they had to test, they had to wear masks, and they couldn't have that level of intimacy that they would have had with a friend without that layer of risk involved.
Can you talk, we'll switch back a little bit to specifically the art, but you were talking about how it can be painful to sit at the easel for long periods of time, but can you talk about your process?
Yeah.
Give us some insight about what it is to create, because you have a range of how you approach things.
Yes.
And I think that's one of my favorite things about this exhibition is that it shows your diversity. And my favorite thing this whole time for 3 weeks is I love to walk in here and flip through the pages of your sketchbook. I feel like it was a special treat to just get to see your creative genius at work. So that was one of my favorite things about this. But I mean, I see the photorealistic graphite work. I see the paint. I mean, you just tell us about the process. I'm not going to talk anymore.
So, thank you, first of all. For many years, when I was working in this sketchbook, I worked in this sketchbook for about 2.5 years, on and off. And for a long time, I felt shame because I wasn't working on finished pieces. So it feels, it's very valuable to me to get that feedback. Much of my process happens in my sketchbook. I study constantly the world around me, and it goes into my sketchbook. And they're my babies, and I love them. Outside of that, I spend most of every day thinking about things of, this water bottle, how would I paint the way that the light is shining through it? What does that look like? How would I put that into a composition? And it's actually something that I learned to do as a teenager to regulate my nervous system. Because when you're in panic all the time, you have to find a way to train your nervous system to believe that it's safe. And so if you're, okay, well, I'm safe because actually I have the time to sit here and look at the dust in the air and nothing is hunting me for sport. I actually can sit here and think about color theory It's really, really helpful, and so I do it all the time. So I spend a lot of time thinking, and then when I have an idea, it goes to discussion. I get a lot of my confirmed ideas and my solid ideas from community. I have in-depth conversations with people in a way that sometimes they're a little startled by, because I'm pretty straightforward. And so we'll talk about hard topics, or we'll talk about fun topics, or our histories, or whatever. And because I practice like radical honesty and vulnerability, those conversations go so far, and I get so many ideas. And then I have to sit and sift through those ideas. And then because I can't picture anything in my head, I then have to go, how can I photograph these things so that I can bind it digitally, so that I can build the composition and then figure out what colors I want to use, and then what medium I want to use. So it's kind of, it takes me a long time to do anything.
And this is before you've even sat down.
Before I've even sat down. It's complicated. But I think that's how I'm able to make pieces that feel a little bit scary, because I spend so much time thinking about how I can do it without it feeling impossible. So really complex pieces in graphite, or really personal pieces in oil, I've already thought through the process. And then the scary part is actually getting my hand to do it.
And how long, like this piece behind me?
Over 100 hours for that piece. This piece, probably 60 hours. So I'm pretty slow. And I am absolutely meticulous.
You took a workshop, did you not?
I did.
With a photorealism painter
I did.
who right now his name has escaped me. I should have wrote it down ahead of time, but that's okay. But
Wish I could tell you.
yeah. But what was like? What did you learn from that process? And how different was it from what you were already doing?
It was very different. He paints in very, very, very thin layers with a lot of medium. And that is not really the way that I do things generally. I paint the way that Tim taught me to paint, where, I put a decent amount of oil in the first layer, and then I paint thicker and, try to keep it even in every layer, I guess, so I don't have to worry as much about fat over lean. With his complicated process, everything was so thin, and it took months to dry. And he wanted every layer to be so precise, and so like you were already trying to paint the finished piece, but with watercolors instead of oil, and building it up. And I found it miserable. I found it really valuable to have that experience, but it wasn't for me. I think one of the coolest things that I learned from him was, as a professional artist, as a celebrity artist, he has people, I don't know if he pays them or they volunteer to work with him, who start his paintings. He gets them to trace them from a projector or draw them, and then they do the majority of the work, and he does the skin and the hair. And he is a hyperrealist artist, but his students do most of the outside realism. And I found that really interesting. And I thought about all of the money that was put into collecting the references, because he would take whole film crews out with him. And so it was very interesting seeing what I can make versus what can be made with very much money and very, very much time and resources, and trying to figure out where I can meet in the middle there. That was really inspiring for me.
Oh, that's good. It sounds like it was a good opportunity.
It was a very interesting opportunity.
But when you were talking about time and feeling like it takes you a long time, do you think that maybe I mean, I know when you're in class, right, we're trying to make you move
Yes.
and trying to get you to produce so you can move forward and keep building your skills, right?
Yes.
But as you, as a person, are you taking the right amount of time for you, or are you putting some kind of like pressure on yourself that you need to be like others, and you're not like others?
I'm not like
None
others.
of us are like anyone else, right? But you have different limitations. So do you think you're like placing some kind of expectation on yourself that doesn't need to be there?
I think I can do that. It is very much a hole that I've fallen into most of my life because of being in school, really. When you're in school until you're 26 and suddenly you're not in school anymore, how do you be productive without those deadlines? But I don't have to produce for anyone currently. So I can kind of make art at my own time. And I'm actually finding that when I don't have a lot of pressure on myself, I'm producing more than I ever have before. And that's been really freeing. But it's hard not to put rules on yourself all the time. And when you have executive dysfunction like I do, it can be hard to get up and make the piece. And so then you think, okay, well then I might as well sit here and finish it in 15 hours. But then you can't walk the next day. So it's finding a balance, fighting the different layers of inaccessibility in the practice itself, and finding systems that work.
So what do you hope that the viewer who's inside your exhibition, what do you want them to walk away with? What do you hope they understand or take with them?
I really hope the influence I want to have on everyone in my life and everyone who views my art is to start viewing every aspect of your life through the lens of disability. If you're having a frustrating conversation with someone and you don't understand where they're coming from, is there a disability in that's happening in this conversation that you're not adjusting for, that they're not adjusting for? If you are doing something in your day-to-day life that is causing you pain and you're feeling frustrated with yourself and like you need to push through, or you think you're stupid and you're talking to yourself and with ableist language, you're lazy, you took a lazy day because you didn't do grueling yard work for 15 hours, why? You know, how can you start looking at the world with a little bit of wonder about disability? There are disability communities that talk openly about disability pride and disability advocacy, and I would love for the average person to start engaging with those people like me who talk openly about our experiences, so that you have more understanding about us and the people in your communities who stories we don't get to tell very often. We don't get a platform like this on a regular basis unless we're, you know, a double amputee who just ran a triathlon. Why is it only the tremendously capable disabled people whose stories are worthy of hearing? I want people to start having compassion for themselves so that they don't become more disabled if they already are disabled, or so that they can accommodate the disabilities they haven't been willing to admit that they have so far. I want them to start figuring out who in their neighborhood has access needs that are not being met. Does your elderly neighbor need help mowing their lawn, getting their groceries, getting their medication? What does that look like? What stories do they have to tell that you can learn from? And I want people to start planning for disability, because you either die young or you become disabled. And you can become disabled at any moment. You could walk out of this room and break your hip today, and your life would be changed forever. Is your house accessible? Is your car accessible? Do you have friends who are ableist that you haven't called out, who if you got COVID right now, and then you got POTS, and you couldn't walk for an extended period of time without passing out, would they show up for you? What does that look like? And I'm really excited that more people are starting to engage with disability, but I want more people to get there.
So I'm going to jump ahead to a different question because of what you just said. I mean, to me, it sounds like you have a body of work in all of what you just said to me that's waiting to be shared.
I do.
In a new way.
I do. I have 2 plans in place. I want to create more stories about disability from others' perspective. This is largely from my perspective. I want more people's stories. I want to share what other people wish that they could put on paper. And the lessons that they wish they had learned, or the lessons that they wish they could teach other people. And I want to, because of the conversations I have with people that are so deep and intense all the time, because I don't really understand social barriers very well as an autistic person, I know people's secrets, and they have secrets that they wish that they could tell anonymously. And so I would love to work with people and have them tell me the things that they wish that they could put on paper and put out into the world without it ever being connected back to them. And I want to make a body of work around that.
I like that.
I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. Let's make that happen. I'm going to call you
Perfect.
repeatedly to make sure that it does. So, as an artist, I know you've had some recent exhibitions prior to ours. So how are you finding these opportunities to share your work with others?
Realistically, all of the professional opportunities that I have found have been through Mott faculty. You, Jenna, and Tim look out for me, and you see things that make you go, Cheyenne. And you send them to me, and I go, okay, sure. And I sign up for them, or I, submit work, and it makes it through. I got into a national, online exhibition as a result of Jenna finding me an opportunity. Networking at Mott has set me up for a career, if that's what I want. And that's really cool. Outside of that, I'm practicing remembering that art may be an everyday thing for me. My art is just what I do. It's like you cook dinner, right? I paint, you design. Those are just things that we do. It doesn't feel like something that needs to be shared a lot of the time. So I'm practicing small, microdosing vulnerability with posting my work outside of my private Facebook posts, posting on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, and just starting to build platforms for myself so I can find opportunities on my own.
That wasn't the answer I was really fishing for. I didn't
No.
think you were going to talk about
No, I'm just so thankful.
I mean, I think that we try to do this for all of our students. We're always looking for opportunities to help lift you all up, to share things with that, and you being willing to meet that challenge, because I know sometimes it is a challenge, to do that. So kudos to you. What trends are you currently following right now in the art world? And trends
I'm
are
not.
It's such a tricky thing to say.
I don't follow trends in the art world
Good.
because of my severe demand avoidance. If there is a trend and I think I need to follow it, I will not make art for 6 months because I don't know how to follow the trend and I don't understand the rules. So I don't.
Well, good.
I try to view art constantly. I'm constantly looking at art on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and so on and so forth, but I do it more so as a community building tool and a lesson. I'm constantly looking at how are they applying paint? How are they doing these things? What is their setup like? What things have they made, streamlined that maybe I can suck up some of that knowledge? But I try not to look at the work that other people are making and go, how could I make that? I can't. I won't. And that's okay.
I like that. I can live with that. Well, then, I guess this question, we'll see how this goes. Are there specific artists, though, that have been an influence to you or that influence your approach or even the things that interest you that you do today?
Yes. I tend to really love artists who have a more simple art style because it's so the opposite of what I have. One of the artists who I've been following since I was like 12 or 13 is Loish. I think her full name is Lois Van Barl, I think is how it's pronounced. And she does a lot of digital work. She's a digital artist, and it's very flowy with cute little features. And I love her digital work. I love her brush work where she does like brush pen and colored pencil. There's an artist on YouTube who reminds me so much of myself that seeing her work inspires me every single time because I'm like, I can make that and I'm excited to do it. That's like, I could make that, but how do I make, like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen and I feel so invigorated. And that is, her name is Al, and I'm blanking on her YouTube handle, but she's incredible. And so I try to find artists who either do like totally opposite of what I do or almost what I do, but like so much cooler and more exciting so I can be like, yeah, like I can't wait to get in my sketchbook today. There's also an artist that I follow who is more of a math person and like a social media person on the internet than posting her art, and that's Kelsey Rodriguez. And I've learned so much from her on the business aspect, the business side of things, how to make YouTube, how to do these things. So I'm making little plans in my head, and I watch every video that she puts out.
What is next for you? Are you working on anything new right now?
I am.
Can you tell? Or is it too soon? Are you still thinking a lot about it?
I'm still kind of thinking about it. I want to do some more self-portrait work. There are some pieces that I have in my mind around, it's still a little tied into disability, the internalized ableism aspect that I didn't touch on as much with these pieces. And I think that I would like to tie it into that larger collection of work with the things that we wish we could have learned earlier. Because even if you are proud of being disabled, there's still those days where you're like, oh my God, I wish I could just do this thing. It's so simple. I just need to wash this dish. You know, and every single person has one of those things that they struggle with and that they wish that they could talk about more without shame. And I would like to explore that in some work. And this upcoming year, I would really, 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 really like to get into an artist residency.
Have you applied to any? Have you looked at any?
I've been looking. I haven't applied yet. They feel very intimidating, but I'm really excited to sit down and actually apply to a few.
Well, I bet I know some references around here that you could use. Just saying.
I would love that.
If you could do anything, dream project, what would it be?
I really struggled with this question. I've been thinking about it for the last week. And honestly, what I'm doing, just making work that I want to make and getting into galleries and having it be seen and having people engage with it I dreamed my whole life of getting my art into this gallery space. I was a small child walking through the Mott building wishing that I could get my work hung up in Mott. And so this has been amazing and touching, and I cried when you messaged me and asked me if I would like to do it. I cried for like 4 days.
That's why you didn't reply.
It is. I was really, really emotional. I messaged like 10 people to be like, oh my God. And separate from that, I want to do surface pattern design. I really want to make a collection of work for paper and fabric especially. I would love to do something like this by Maya Kern with designs that get put on apparel.
See, I knew you would go back to design stuff. I knew it wasn't gone. You were too good.
There's a reason I took design classes.
So what would you say the best advice you've ever been given?
I wrote this down, and I would love to find it because I want to get it right. So it's a quote. I wrote a whole quote down. And it's two different quotes that have kind of become one in my head. So the first is a little bit of a monologue that happens in the movie The Beautiful Losers. And it's a quote from Margaret Kilgallen that I heard for the first time, I think my sophomore year of high school, when my perfectionism was ruining my life and my relationship to art. Because when your whole identity is I'm an artist, when you make art that feels bad, it's easy to feel like you are a bad person. Especially when you're younger and you don't have as much world yet. You haven't engaged with the world on a broader scale yet. Your world is very small. So hearing this quote from an artist who did hand-painted signs, like large scale, really changed my life. I do everything by hand, even if I'm doing really big letters. And I spend a lot of time going over the line and trying to make it straight. I'll never be able to make it straight. From a distance, it might look straight, but when you get close up, you can always see the line waver. And I think that's where the beauty is. And that was the first time that I'd ever heard someone say anything other than photorealism was like cool. And it made me cry right then with my group of friends who were all edgy and like would never cry, you know? I was bawling. And then that kind of started the course correction that allowed me to become the artist that I am today. And then years later, when I was 24, I think, I heard a quote from Chris Evans, Captain America, in an interview, Becoming Chris Evans, where he talks about how when he was younger, he had very severe anxiety, and he still does. And he actually went to therapy to decide if he would even take the Captain America role, because he was putting so much pressure on himself. And they asked him, you know, Chris, if you could give a younger Chris Evans advice, what would you say? And his answer was just, shh. The noise that your brain is making, the anxiety that you have, it's just noise. It's just your brain entertaining itself. And as someone with ADHD, that really was like a punch in the gut. I had never heard someone say something that felt, I hadn't felt so seen before about this particular thing. Because if you don't know, people with ADHD, we tend to be severely understimulated if we aren't severely overstimulated. And it's really hard to find the right balance. And if you're not stimulating, like getting stimulation somewhere, your brain will make it. It will chew on itself and distress itself, thinking of the worst things it can think of to get a chemical reaction. Because you're still getting all of those stress hormones that give it something to do. And so the combination of those two quotes of, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. Your brain is just making so much noise about this. Maybe you should get up and walk away. Maybe you should walk further away from it and look at it from a distance, which Tim really, really, really pushed and was constantly like, get up and move away from the painting. That changed my life. It really allowed me to be less rigid and to hate my art less and therefore hate myself less. It worked.
Those are both excellent.
Thanks, Chris Evans.
I know. Now I understand. So right before the talk, Professor Kranz came up and handed Cheyenne a Captain America shield that she had lost in the, and now it makes sense why you have. I was like, why would she have a Captain America? I mean, Captain America's great, but I was just not understanding.
Captain America got me through a lot of grief.
Yeah, that's great.
With myself and outside of myself. So.
So we have a lot of students in the room today.
Yes.
And as a former student yourself, what advice do you have for them?
This feels hard when you are a student currently and when you have to make work that maybe you wouldn't make otherwise. And when you have a job with work that, maybe you wouldn't make otherwise. But the biggest lesson that I have to give is learn to love the process more than you'll ever care about the finished project, whatever that means. Find a process that doesn't feel like you have to rip out your teeth to get through it. And remember that when you're working on something and you're sitting there and you're talking to yourself horribly because it's not going well, and you feel like you aren't prepared enough to do this piece, and maybe you're actually the worst artist who's ever been alive. I don't know, that's how it feels sometimes. That just means you have more to learn. And the whole point of being an artist is that we will never know everything. It is a lifelong learning experience. Having more to learn should be an exciting thing if you love to make art, because that means you have hours and hours and hours and hours and hours to spend doing your favorite thing in the world, if you're like me. And also, when you're having those negative self-talk moments, stop yourself and ask, if I make the most beautiful painting in the world right now, but I hate every second of it, am I truly successful? Is that the life as an artist that I want to live? For me, the answer is no. I will never feel successful if I hate every second of it. And bringing it back to disability, a lot of the self-talk that we have in those moments that makes us feel like the worst artist alive, it's ableism. It's just ableism. You're not stupid, you're not lazy, you're not incapable. You just need to adjust. You need to take a break. You need to go stretch. You need to give your brain something else to chew on for a little while if you can. It will make a significant difference. Don't fall into grind culture. Don't fall into burnout. Take care of yourself. Learn to love the process. And if you're like me and all of those tips don't feel like they're working and you need to work on something else or your brain feels like it's eating itself, Tim taught me to procrastinate on a piece by just working on another piece. And it has made me the most productive artist I have ever been in my entire life. If you're working on a painting and you hate it and you feel like you don't know how to proceed, what if you started working in your sketchbook and you came back to it later? You might have found the solution in that time.
You're back to that walk away moment.
Walk away.
Yep.
I walk away a lot.
There is absolutely nothing wrong with
There's
that.
nothing wrong with it.
That's good. That's good advice.
You're
Called
right.
out. Called out. So I'd like to open this up. Do you have any questions for Cheyenne? Well, you can ask 3. No. Well, wait. I'm sorry. Give me 1 minute. You have to talk on the mic. I just have to make sure I turn this on right. Oh, I think I have to click and hold. Sorry. I was like, come on.
We can be sweaty together.
Because we're live streaming this. Because we're live streaming it. Brian? Can you hear me? Come on in, find a seat. Okay, good. All right, Sarah, you had a question. I'm sorry.
I have like a million, but I won't remember all of them. So there's just a million and one things I want to say to you. Like I know you through Facebook mostly. Like that's just been where I've gotten to know you, and I find myself relating to you in a million and one ways. So I want to be your friend, first of all. And I just want to kind of affirm a few of the things that you said, you know, like, because I'm what, almost how many years older than you? I don't even know. A lot. Like when I came in here and I said, imagine yourself in 5, imagine yourself in 10. It's just the biggest thing that like I've learned when it comes to making art or just creating is that we hear that this thing like drilled into it, like it's baby steps. And we think of these baby steps as these perfect little linear things, you know, dee, I'm baby stepping.
They're not.
But I've had 3 kids.
Yeah.
Baby step is get up, fall on your face. Get up, fall on your ass. Get up and don't get up and throw tantrums and scream and cry and then get up and then run. It's there. Progress isn't linear. It isn't. Sometimes progress is just stopping and sitting with it and stewing for like 3 days and not getting out of bed. But when you are somebody that isn't like everyone else, because I'm also autistic, I'm also ADHD, I have OCD, I have a million, I called myself alphabet soup woman here. But if you just get up and keep going, you're gonna get somewhere eventually, and you just look and be like, oh wow, I did that, and I did that, and I did that, and I did that, go me. But being plagued with that negativity all the time is, again, it's mental illness.
It is.
It's mental illness. I can't not be mean to myself. But I can also find moments to be kind to myself. And so I just want to say I'm really glad I came, because I almost did it, because I had a panic attack on the way here. I almost turned the car around. But with Mott, I mean, this is like a home.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable here. Like when you commented about like the accommodations, man, I was all over this building every single day. I mean, I was hiding in an office. I was in a closet, you know, I was just, but being allowed to go at my pace and do the things and have that radical transparency with my professors. I finally graduated after trying for 15 years, you know?
It took me 10.
Yep. I think I started in 99 and I graduated what? 5, 6, 7, 8? I don't know. It's been a minute.
Yeah.
To me, it feels like yesterday because I have no sense of time. I'm time blind. So I just mostly want to say I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
And if you ever want to be radically honest with someone and bounce ideas off, please hit me up.
I will.
I mean, I'm being personal here, of course, but that's how I communicate with people. COVID was really pivotal because it did show you who was going to be there, who was going to show up, who was going to be patient and kind, and then watching people just kind of F off.
It's true.
But then when you see what's left, it's like, wow, these are my people, and you just kind of hold on to a little more. So,
Yeah. Something you said with the baby steps.
yeah.
I'm fairly new to oil painting. I've made less than 20 pieces.
Could have fooled me.
And when I worked on that frog in the mouth painting, it was my 4th or 5th oil painting. I'm not really sure. Do you know, Tim? 5? 4th. It was my 4th. And not even halfway through that painting, I think we had worked on it one day in class when the shutdown happened. And I had to work from home. And I am a little baby who needs my hand held at all times.
Oh, yeah.
When I'm trying something new. And I was laying under my easel crying and chain smoking cigarettes and chugging Monster to work on that painting. And I am not exaggerating.
I have one oil pastel that I did here, and I tantrum the entire time.
The whole time.
I mean,
But
I was just like
I have
this
to
on the
complain,
floor of the...
But it gets done. You know, you have to allow
Yeah.
yourself those moments of, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
To do
Yeah,
it.
and the ugliest thing I ever did is still hanging in the office.
Yeah.
And I looked at it today as I went by, and I was like, oh, wait, that actually was good. You know, it's just, you know. No, it's beautiful.
But if you were crying while you made that, were you loving what you were doing at that moment?
Oh, absolutely not.
All right.
I was so scared at every turn because I still didn't know how to use the medium. And I was so just like I at that time especially, I was putting so much pressure on myself for every little thing I did. I'm very grateful for the amount of time and energy Tim took in babying me through that process, because I was a nervous wreck for the entire first semester and most of the second semester. I'm not good at being bad at things. I'm not good at being new to things, because in order to learn, you have to mess up. Yeah. What a concept.
So other questions? I know there are.
So first, I just want to say in general, as a person with physical disability, with ADHD, and as a queer person, it feels really amazing to see your work up and to see that people like us can get out there in the world and that we can be seen. And even in a modern day and age, it still feels hard. But what I really wanted to ask you was, do you believe that learning to champion these things of your identity or learning to be more proud in them has helped you with your art or helped you be more consistent with putting your art out there?
Yes. Undeniably, yes. I'm kind of a person who I have to talk around an issue 100 times before I can really internalize it. And so in the process of getting my diagnoses, it took a couple of years of constant work, of working, of going to school, and in the process of all of that, finding a way to go out to Ann Arbor from Flint 3 times a week, 4 times a week. And I talked about it constantly. And because I was talking about it constantly, I was so aware of the ways I was being unkind to myself, because my friends would say, "What have you been doing all week? Why do you think that that isn't incredible? Like, you did so much." And that kindness that I was taught by my lovely friends and my family transitioned into the way that I talked about myself while I was making work. And when I'm not laying under an easel and crying and sobbing and chain smoking the whole time, I actually can get more done. Weirdly. It actually takes like a lot of energy to be that upset all of the time. And so yeah, it made a tremendous difference not being so afraid and not being afraid to accommodate myself. The first time that I was ever accommodated in a class felt life-changing to me after a lifetime of no accommodation. And it made such a big difference. And again, it was Tim. Thank you, Tim. It felt like, oh my God, I can do this. And if I can do that in this class today, what changes can I make in my life that can make my process easier so that I can get up and not feel like I have to pull teeth to get this done? And it helped. So now I set my painting setup up before I go to bed. So when I wake up in the morning, I don't have to worry about that. I can just sit down and paint. I got all of my reference done on a different day than I would start painting. You stop fighting yourself, and it works.
What do I say? They just got a little.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's fine.
Nobody can hear you.
Oh, nobody can hear me. Oh, what I said is like, what did I just say? Oh, when you stop fighting yourself, things get to be so much easier, because like we're told, like, if you're going to do a process, you do A and then B and then C and then D. But why can't you just go do B, then Y and Z and just bounce all over the place? Yeah. Like when you mentioned procrastination projects, that's how I get through my day. It's like I've got 4 or 5 of them going. They might not get all done today, but they don't have to. They'll get done eventually. But yeah, it's just a matter of not fighting yourself so hard.
I do.
I have to go back to work, so, work things.
Okay.
Mostly I just wanted to say, like, as your sister, I am so proud of you. I'm not going to cry, I swear, so I'm not going to look at you. But, like, seeing you as you've grown up and all the struggles that you've had internally and also physically, emotionally, everything else, all of your struggles, like, knowing that you have been able to come out of them all in the best way possible. I know sometimes you don't think so, but knowing as somebody who's seen and witnessed everything, I am absolutely proud of you and everything that you've accomplished. And I can't wait to see what else you do. So,
I love you.
I love you. Anyway, there you go.
Bye. Right, Carter, you had a follow-up.
I just wanted to say one last thing. I just wanted to say thank you for showing us that artists like us can not only do this, but we can be better than good, that we can, our voices can be heard. You've really, as a person and as an artist, made me feel seen. So thank you.
I'm so glad. Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? Oh,
I just want to go back to a little thing that you said where you're not good at being bad at things. And I think, I mean, it was, said with a laugh, but, you really mean it. But I think that's a issue that a lot of students deal with. Well, a lot of us artists deal with. I mean, I'm not including May in there, but like Tim and I talk about quite often, it's like getting students to make bad art, because that's how you learn, by making the bad art, make bad sketches, make bad thumbnails. And I think that was like a really powerful, small little thing that you threw in there. For the question, I had a question. You mentioned that you took one art class that changed your direction. What was the class?
It was drawing one.
Cool.
It was a prerequisite
Mm-hmm.
for photography, and I, the whole time, wanted to cry.
I think a lot of students feel that way in drawing one.
And I told the professor almost every day, "You're ruining my life." And I could not have been less correct. And I was young, because I was in Mott Middle, so it was extra difficult for me because I think I was 16 or 17 at the time, and it was an older group of students, so they were mid to late 20s largely, and I just felt so out of my element, but I was so embraced in the classroom by the professor and by the students. I really excelled. And I couldn't stop thinking about it ever again, and I never went back.
It's amazing, too, that we like to avoid discomfort, right? I mean, we don't want to be but by allowing us to be uncomfortable in that discomfort, it really pushes us further.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, whether physically or like being in a room where you don't feel like you fit, right? So.
It makes a big difference. And I'm still learning how to be bad at things, but having the support from community has made it possible. Also a good therapist. I was given an assignment to intentionally make the worst piece of art that I could possibly make. What would that look like? And because you're fulfilling the assignment, it still feels like you're succeeding, even though you're making something that feels maybe like a waste of supplies sometimes. And it really helped. And I recommend anyone do it if you're like me, and the idea of messing up or making something ugly makes you want to freak out and cry. Do it on purpose. Make the ugliest thing you can make.
I have time for one more question.
When the gallery first opened and your work was in here, the first thing that I went to were your sketchbooks. I just love the way that you just like let it all out in them. And when I was flipping through, like I'd see pages that were literally just like notes about what you were gonna do for the day, and like sometimes it'd be more about like a piece or something like that. I was just wondering, like, do you do that like on a daily basis? Are you just like always in your sketchbook?
I go through phases with my sketchbook. I might not touch my sketchbook for 6 months, and then I might be in my sketchbook every moment of a day for a week. When I'm more intentional about using it more like a journal, I'm in it constantly because I want to jot things down, and then I have to revisit the things that I jot down, and so then while I'm there, I might as well draw something.
It was a habit that I fell into when I started painting with Tim's class. Was he had assigned an assignment, the guidelines were very vague, and so I'd start journaling and then also thumbnailing and stuff like that too, and it was like a really nice process. It's really cool to see like I'm not the only one that does it.
Absolutely not.
And I just love looking at your sketchbooks. They're just phenomenal.
Thank
Just
you.
everything about them. I just love sketchbooks. Thank you.
So any final thoughts that you want to share with everyone?
I want to reiterate how thankful I am to you for extending this offer to me. I cried for days. I'm not joking. I'm seriously so thankful. And to the rest of Mott faculty for making this such a safe place for me as a disabled person, as a queer person, as all of the things that I've talked about today. I don't think I could have graduated without the accommodations that you all gave me, and that you didn't make me fight for. In a lot of programs, I would have been fighting tooth and nail, and my accommodations still might not have been met. And I had to fight so hard just to do the work, and you saw that. And you all accommodated me and made it possible. And I'm just so thankful that you're looking out for students like me. And it truly means the world to me that I've had so many opportunities because you see me, because you look out for your students. You see opportunities and you think of us, so thank you.
Well, you're very kind. It's what we're here to do. We want our students to succeed. We want you to succeed. And I just want to thank you for your time today. I know this was not the easiest of things for you to do, but you did it. And you were everything and more that I hoped you would be today. So thank you. Thank all of you for joining us today for this art talk. I hope you will come back and visit our gallery. Tomorrow is the last day of Cheyenne's exhibition. Next week we'll be setting up for our next artist, which is Carla Harden, who is also one of our graduates of the program, and she'll be doing her exhibition called Headspace, which is a series of portraits that she has worked on. And that will open on April 3rd and run through April 21st, which is the same day she'll do her art talk. So we hope to see you back here, and thank you again. You're amazing.